Well, good afternoon and welcome to this week's episode of the At Show. Today, we're answering the question, are your organizations making their calls accessible to disabled people? I've just come off a call from a disabled person who I'm helping, and she is due to have a meeting with a social worker tomorrow. And the social worker has sent her an email link, and the link is for Microsoft Teams. Now, the assumption is that she could dial in on a telephone call, but sadly, unless I can see from the way that the Teams has generated the call, it's not going to fly unless she has an iPhone switched on, which she can't access because she can't use her hands. The best method would be to use the computer, which requires somebody to switch it on and then to find the email and then to click on the link. So my role, which I offered, is to actually attend the meeting and to operate the technology using a connection with her laptop and enabling her to communicate in the meeting. But the person concerned just said, oh, well, just click on the link. Actually, that isn't good enough. There's been no kind of understanding of the nature of the disability or the complexity of having to solve this problem. From some people who have all their systems operating, that wouldn't be too much of a problem. But here are some key things that might help organizations to be better at delivering accessibility. For instance, if you are producing a video conferencing meeting, have it on a link. Make very sure, this is point number 2, make very sure that you have a list of settings in your video conferencing tool that you can actually adapt to change, so there is no barriers to connectivity. This may be a problem in terms of privacy in some settings, but which is more important, the privacy of that individual or the actual ability to connect at all. Now, for some people who are blind, phone calls will suffice that. But if you're running a meeting, which is a conference between lots of people, and maybe they're not even in the same room, they can't be because of COVID, then obviously using video conferencing tools is extremely important and an expert to actually be solved. I'm longing for the day when our smart speakers can cope with conference calls like that, and enabling people to join Zoom through their smart speaker and then be able to join in with a group. And this may seem very obvious, but perhaps not, as organizations haven't really twigged the access needs of certain individuals' complex needs. They need an advocate. That's my final point, a helper, a technical support to enable them to attend meetings. So maybe organizations should be looking for individuals or particularly assistive technologists who could help support people in their meetings. Interestingly, I've been contacted recently to do remote assessments, and obviously that will involve connections over the internet and developing techniques to actually deliver those assessments, how far you can go with that. But I have to say, due to screen sharing, there is a lot that can be done remotely, and the ability to take over screens and work with somebody directly is surprisingly easy and intuitive, as long as the equipment is able to be set up to cope with that. So when considering these particular access needs, what do we need? What seems to be needed in the room? Well, we could do with a remote connection, do look at previous episodes. We need to have support people who are willing to help with that. They could be trained in simply clicking on a Zoom connection or a Teams connection, and then the ability to problem solve if something happens and that person drops out. I attended, in fact, I was tech support on it, on a conference last week for Inclusion Scotland. We had apparently over 190 people on that call, which is totally amazing. And we smoothly moved from one thing to another. The need to have support teams working large events to give access to people who are not local or spread out across the Highlands, in this case in Scotland, is vital. And to say we didn't lose a man may have been a brave claim, but we certainly maintained contact. And because the event was technically managed, it was a success. I conversed that with a meeting I attended for a quiz for a community group who were trying to raise money for a project, which was perhaps the diametric opposite of it. No preparation, no pre-assigned breakout rooms, and there were 29 different breakout rooms for quiz group members to be in. It was a nightmare for those organising it, and very disruptive for those who were taking part in it. But nevertheless, it happened, and people coped. It just took an extremely long time, and lots of "you're not in the room, you're mute," and all of these kind of things going on, or everybody talking at once. So it sort of exploded into a cacophony of noise, and I think it was actually an absolute picture of how not to run an online event for a lot of people. It needs to be well planned. A lot of work needs to go into online events. And our organizations doing service to people with disability with that kind of thought needing to be thought through a lot more. It sounds simple, connect me to a quiz or a meeting or such. But behind that needs to be planning. It needs to be underpinned with support mechanisms and to enable that person to join in. I felt this is an assistive tech talk because it requires some tweaking of standard tools that everybody is using. And our enemy is assumption. And assume what that stands for? It makes an ass out of you and me. ASSU, me. So what we're looking at here is how we can make sure that all the ticks are squared and all the boxes are set up correctly. And that's not really a technical thing. It's about making sure that somebody does have access and looking at it from their point of view, having that understanding of disability and technical solution, which is so much needed in this day when we are so far apart and yet can be so close with technology. So a short one today in some ways, but thank you for watching, and do come and be along for the next AT show next week. Goodbye for now.